Well, good morning, Worksaholics and the entire Worksaholic Nation. I know we have agents from all over the country, from as far west as California, Oregon, and Washington State, and as far east as New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Florida. We certainly appreciate our friends from Georgia online. Today's course, I think, is kind of real estate 101, if you ask me. This is a session that really should be the first piece of the puzzle for a residential real estate agent coming into the business in 2014, or maybe restarting in the business in 2014. In fact, if you can't convert ad, sign, or internet inquiries, you're going to be of less value as a listing agent, aren't you? Isn't your responsibilities as a listing agent to milk or juice those buyer leads that come in for every ounce of value for your sellers? So for the past 17 and a half years, we've been teaching a system that is kind of a step-by-step program for our buyers agents and for the agents that needed to create some sort of a protocol in order to more efficiently convert buyer leads. Well, it's a neat conversation to have, considering the sponsors of the Works platform are always mortgage lenders. So for example, in San Antonio, Texas, Cecilia and Ameripro Funding is responsible for paying for all the real estate agents that are online for any class that Works does. And the interesting thing about this relationship is this particular course that we're going to talk about today has the maximum relevance for your lending partner. So if you have a lending partner at Academy Home Mortgage out in Utah or Nevada, or Arizona, or if you have a lending partner with Ameripro in Texas or Colorado, or all over the Eastern Seaboard, Annie Mac Home Mortgage or Advantage Title or American Equity Mortgage or Southeast Mortgage are your lending partners, then this is going to be the place where the rubber meets the road, baby. I mean, if together we could collectively convert more leads, it's going to be of value to you in your checkbook, in your wallets, in your paychecks, and it's going to be of value to our lending partners that are responsible for sponsoring the entire Works platform. You know, I don't think the problem in 2014 is necessarily lead generation. And the first conversation I want to share with you is a lot of research that was done in the 2014 calendar year, sifting through all the national trainers, sifting through all the lead generation mechanisms that are out there. And nobody's going to claim that this is an infallible top 10 list, but it certainly would appear that in the context of residential real estate, lead generation has taken on an electronic life of its own. And your opportunity as a real estate agent has never been greater to create leads. You know, when I started in '86, I'd spend $150 for a Sun Sentinel classified ad, and for that $150 investment, I would hope to get 4 to maybe 6 quality buyer leads out of that ad. And if I ran a full page in the Harmon or a full page in the real estate print magazines, spending $300 to $500 per month, hope to get 8 to 10 to 12, 15 buyer inquiries for that month. Now, the value that we put on buyer leads back then was enormously more intensive than the value you might put on 150 internet leads a month. You understand what I'm saying? The reality is the faucet of leads can turn on so quickly for you by spending so little money. The problem isn't, in our humble opinion, creating buyer leads or the responsibility of lead generation per se. However, the more important equation, the more important ratio is of those hundreds and hundreds of buyer leads that your broker or you are creating, what are you doing with them specifically? So we offer you this top 10 lead generation sources. And these are guys like Mike Ferry, Tom Ferry, Walter Sanford, Todd Bates, Brian Buffini. You go around the country and you listen to all of them and you study up on what the technology is. And you find that the $1 million plus agents, the $600,000 a year plus agents are all managing a very concerted online strategy of their very, very own. In other words, they're not going to sit around waiting for someone else to feed their family. They're like the sharks of the world. They're going to use their own online strategy. And in many cases, guys, your own online strategy does include a blog and a YouTube video channel. Some of the top tier agents in the country use a video channel on YouTube, a blog, and a very systematized lead capturing and lead harvesting technology of their own. Certainly number 2 has been past customers and sphere of influence. Farm and geographic farm and demographic farm still tip the scales in the top 3 for bringing on more and more buyer leads and or seller leads. Ultimately, Google AdWords has become the most phenomenal resource. In fact, if you're buying leads from Market Leader, if you're buying leads from Boomtown or Tiger Leads, it's most likely that what you're actually buying is their Google AdWords leads. So, just so you know, you could convert them, you could create them yourself. Realtor.com is 6.6 million visitors a month compared to I think 200, 300,000 a month for the second best. And you've got a lot of opportunities to grow your Realtor.com relationship. Craigslist loaders. I know Craigslist has become more difficult in the last 12 to 18 months, but it still represents one of the top 10 resources for agents across the country for lead generation. And now the new relationships, contract relationships with Trulio and Zillow and Point2 NLS. And then one of my last little ditch favorite here, old school. When I visit with top agents, like I did this week in Denver, or when I visit with top agents that I do in South Florida, it seems to me that face-to-face contact is still the number one elixir for generating revenue. In fact, open houses or face-to-face contact with buyers is still one of the most effective methodologies in the United States real estate market, because most of you are charismatic people. Most of you are trustworthy by nature. You have a likability about you. And that likability, that trustworthiness, that character or that charisma that only you generate doesn't necessarily translate on the web. So when you get out in the field, your best resource is face-to-face, voice-to-voice contact. And that's why open houses still represents one of the top lead generation mechanisms. So we're going to chop this conversation up into 4 categories for the next couple minutes. And I want you to know that each of these 4 at the top of your screen really truly represent completely diverse skill sets. In other words, the skill to generate a lead is a completely different skill than to capture that lead. And then the skill to harvest that lead over 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months at a time is a completely different skill set than generating and capturing. And finally, the conversion skill, the lead conversion skill, where we're going to focus most of our energy today, that's a whole different skill entirely. And I'm going to drop something on you that you can love or don't love, but I can generate leads for 10 to 12 bucks an hour. I can capture leads for 10 to 12 bucks an hour or simple technology, and I can harvest leads for 10 to $12 an hour or simple technology. But I can't convert leads without $100 to $250 an hour talent. Understand this now. Lead generation is as simple as dropping lures into the marketplace that are sticky and have some barb on the hook, and generating those leads is as simple as putting good quality information out in the field. Anybody can train a monkey how to generate leads. Anybody can train a computer technology to capture that lead. In other words, you tease them with information. If they want that next level information, they have to register and capture that lead. That's a computer technology skill now. What about the art of harvesting a lead? I mean, come on, that's just keeping them in the loop over a long period of time. But you're talking about $100 to $250 talent to convert the lead. So there are some resources for you on the bottom of the screen, like Webmax and Zerple and Zoho and Boomtown and Market Leader. You've probably heard of names like Conversion, Selectrified. You've probably heard of Agent 360 now. I mean, there's probably 25 vendors in the lead generation, lead capture, and lead harvesting side of the equation. But you know what I haven't found yet? I haven't found a technology that replaces the human voice-to-voice, eyeball-to-eyeball contact that is necessary for true lead conversion to contract. So my advice to you is to check with your local board of realty before you spend any money on a lead generation, lead capture, lead harvesting technology, because so many of the boards have started to initiate lead harvesting and lead capture technology into the services that they provide their members that I would hate for you to go out and spend $2,000 a month with Market Leader, or $200 a month for an individual account when there's certain tools that are available to you on your own board of realty. So again, we touched on lead generation and lead capture and lead harvesting. These are all enormously valuable skill sets, but let's face it, guys, it doesn't take $100 an hour talent to post. So at the risk of being redundant, we stay in the sector of lead generation and lead capture. We move to the sector of lead harvesting, which is long-term, compelling MLS information being fed to that buyer over and over and over. But it's my contention here at the onset of this conversation, and the reason for this particular course is not lead generation, it is not lead capture, it is not lead harvesting. The purpose for this course is the $100 to $250 an hour job of lead conversion. And I'm going to state for the record that if you're not compelling once you get voice to voice, let's think about this. I spend $2,000 a month on lead gen, capture, and harvesting, but if I don't personally have the magnetic information that is charismatic, that is interesting, that is compelling, once I get voice to voice, what is the chances of me converting the lead at all? It's all about voice to voice. I could live without the technology as long as I had good voice to voice. The second picture on the right really speaks to the highest earners in the country. And that is, what do they do once they're voice to voice? And what do they do once the family or the decision maker joins them in the conference room? See, rookie agents are trained to go out and show property. Top tier agents are trained to sell, to influence decision making, to change their buyer's mind. And there's a big, vast canyon of difference between a chauffeur and a gopher and a professional consultant and an advisor. And you're never going to make money in the residential real estate industry being a chauffeur or a gopher. You're going to make money in the residential real estate industry by being a trusted consultant and advisor. And the only way you're going to earn that title, the only way you're going to earn that place in the buyer's heart, is through fantastic voice-to-voice skills and compelling presentation skills in the conference room. That's really what this class is about. So I'm going to invite you to follow along in your workbook. If you haven't printed your workbook, I believe there's a text chat on the bottom that has a link in it for your workbook. You can go back and get it. But let's face it, let's say I've been harvesting you as my buyer since August of 2013. You know, you've been part of my system. You always go on and search near and here. Now I'm getting ready to call you, or you're getting ready to call me for our first voice-to-voice contact. You can feel the rubber meeting the road there, right? Now this is voice to voice now. You've responded to 55 emails, sent you all kinds of stuff. Ultimately, the professional preparation for that voice to voice contact cannot be undervalued. We have a couple, 6 as a matter of fact, theories in the residential real estate business as we're leading towards the preparation. And the first one is the realization that the buyer doesn't really care who they buy a house from. In fact, if they knew that you stood to make 15 grand off of their transaction, they might even resent the fact that all you're really doing is pulling up listings and bringing them to them. So they're not really protecting your commission interest. We never go into a buyer relationship expecting that the buyer is going to protect our commission interests. We expect that they almost resent our commission interests. The second theory is that every buyer wants the best house for the least amount of money. This is the only consistent. If anybody knows Mary Lee Lighty in Millsboro, Delaware, they need to reach out to her because she can't hear sound, but I can't reach out to her. Maybe Service or Carrie could reach out to her and see if they can fix her problem. I think these are really useful beliefs as it relates to setting and managing my own expectations. I want you to hear what I mean by that. In other words, if I position myself in the mindset that the buyer doesn't care about my commissions, the buyer wants the most amount of house for the least amount of money, and damn it, he's going to do everything in his power to get the most amount of house for the least amount of money. The third one is that I don't believe that buyers are liars. I believe that most buyers just don't know what's out there. So when they say something like, I want a 4-2 with a pool, that's just because they haven't exposed themselves to all the information. Maybe there's a 4-3.5 with a pool. Maybe there's an upstairs house that has a master downstairs, and they said, no, I don't want any 2-story homes. So a lot of times, real estate agents kind of shrug their responsibility to be a professional consultant and advisor, and they just dissuade personal responsibility by saying the buyer is a liar. Well, that's not true. It's just that you're not growing your relationship with them in a way that makes them open up to new and different ideas and to keep the conversation alive and entrust you with all the details of their decision making. Let's face it, almost every buyer that is ever going to contact us thinks they can get more house than they really can. You know, they've heard that the foreclosure market is huge. I'm just sending a text right now to my partners to send the workbook again. A lot of people are saying they don't have the workbook yet, and I need to have my team send out that workbook link one more time. Almost every buyer thinks they're going to get more house for the money than they actually will, so don't begrudge that fact. Now, here's the real exciting thing about our industry. A buyer side transaction is going to pay on average about $225 an hour. $225 per hour is a decent living, don't you think? My recommendation is that it's not the time that you spend with buyers that makes the money. It's the ability to eliminate the buyers that waste your time that make you money. So no realtor online today is ever going to complain about $225 an hour. What they complain about is the fact that they spent time with 6 different buyers until they got one to close, so their end result is $40 an hour. Does that resonate with you as a residential real estate agent, that if we could solve the problem of not working with buyers that aren't going to buy, our income stays in the $225 an hour? If we have to go through 4 or 5 buyers to find one that's going to close, then our income drops down to about $40 or $50 an hour. That's pretty bad. So we're going to work through this workbook, and hopefully you can go and print it from that link down there. And we're going to go back to that. We're going to go back to that relationship that I've been harvesting you as a lead for a couple of months now. Maybe you checked in on my website back in December, and through call capture, lead capture, we got your information, and then through lead harvesting, we were able to stay in touch with you for 3 or 4 months because our MLS keeps spitting out information to you. But now, here we are from December when you first inquired to April and May when I'm getting ready to contact you because it looks like your searching is picking up. Then I need to prepare myself for that call. Hello, Mr. Hyatt. I noticed that you've been looking at 249.9 houses online for the past week or so. I want to walk through the steps that I'm going to take this buyer through that is going to build my credibility in this. So the first one is I got to be clear about what the subject property is that I know sparked his interest. Then I need to have 3 to 5 bump to properties. This is a very specific list. I need to be very familiar with the subject property that I want to call him on. Then I need to have 3 to 5 bump to properties that I know are compelling to him as well. The next thing I want to know is I want to familiarize myself with a couple of subdivisions that are in that price range that he's searching with. If I'm a 20-year veteran, I probably know them like off the tip of my tongue. But if I'm a 3 to 6 month realtor, or a 1-year realtor or less, or maybe a 2-year realtor, maybe I need to go in and research some subdivision names before I contact this buyer so that I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Fair? Now, in preparation for this call, I probably already need to know some financing rules of thumb. How much does a house cost for $249,900 with 20% down? How much is it to finance this house with $100,000 down? What are some qualification guidelines? Does it help me to sound more knowledgeable if I have these financing rules of thumb in the back of my head? And the whole lesson here, and I know this is a lot of text on this particular screen, and there is quite a bit of text in the workbook, but I think there is a granular process for lead conversion. And having managed hundreds and hundreds of agents and now helping thousands across the country, I'll go for this. It's better to have a system and an operating protocol that you stick with over and over and over that you can perfect and make work better than it is to fly by the seat of your pants and just try it a certain way, different each time. So our suggestion is that, putting in some time for preparation before you make the first voice-to-voice contact is probably the most professional thing you can do. The other thing is you want to carry with you in your arsenal of tools some rules of thumb about monthly payments and create some propositions that might interest the buyer. And we're going to get into those just in a little bit more. But I think the number one thing before that voice-to-voice contact is to understand your objective. When a batter steps up to the plate, there's a little bit of nervous energy in that batter's box. If anybody's ever stood at the batter's box getting a 94-mile-an-hour pitch, you know that there's some anxiety. There's a lot of people watching you. There's a lot of pressure. The reality is you need to understand your objective before you step into voice-to-voice contact, because that voice-to-voice contact is the batter's box. Are you going to hit a single or are you going to hit a home run? If you hit a single on your first voice-to-voice contact, it means that you got a D. Look at that screen down at the bottom, that you just got to show property. Some agents think that's a home run. I got off the phone, I get to show property. No way, Jose. That is chauffeur gopher work. That means I hit a little bunt and I got to first base. I got to show some property. I hate showing property, guys. I think if you're a residential real estate agent, you need to have a disposition that if I'm showing property, I need to really watch my time. Because showing property for 2, 3, 4 days and then having a buyer escape without writing a contract is a heartbreaking endeavor. If I were to get on second base, it means that we had a great conversation and I said, hey, my partner is Cecilia Davales at AmeriPro Funding, and she's here on standby to qualify you for mortgage opportunities, whether it be a reduced monthly payment that you're looking for, or a quicker amortization so that you can get closer to retirement, or you want the lowest down payment program. She's the person that can help you decide which vehicle you're going to use to finance this house. Why don't I set you up a telephone conversation with Cecilia at AmeriPro Funding so that she can walk you through all the mortgage stuff. If I got that done, then I've got a double. That's not a bad hit, a double. Now, if I get to third base, it means that I got them to come into my conference room. That's right. I believe it's more valuable to have a buyer come into your conference room than it is to have them pre-qualified on the phone by your lender or preliminary meet and greet. You've heard me say it. Now you can all debate. Oh, Russ is an old codger. He doesn't know anything about sales anymore. He thinks it's better to bring an appointment into the conference room than it is to qualify him on the phone or meet him and show him houses. Well, I guarantee if you interview $600,000 plus earners, I guarantee if you interview people who make 600 grand plus, they agree that it is more valuable to have the client drive to your office, get out of their car, enter the conference room, and sit down with you than any other thing that you could do in the buyer lead conversion process. And you as a residential real estate agent will be better served economically speaking. Your income will grow faster if you realize that triples are better than singles or doubles. that getting a buyer into the conference room is more valuable than an on-the-phone conference call or pre-qual with your lender. Now, the last one is something that escapes a lot of agents, and that is the appointment to meet them at their home. And this truly does escape a lot of agents. They almost cringe when they hear that a buyer hasn't sold their house yet. And even if the listing is 60 miles away from my office, I jump up and down. I think it's the best time to meet a consumer when their house isn't listed yet. Because if I got a buyer inquiry, I got somebody walked in my open house, and they readily admit to me that they're needing to sell their house before they buy, boy howdy, I am jumping up and down because I consider that a grand slam home run. I can get in, I can list it, I can refer it to a good agent to list it if it's outside of my marketplace. I can collect a referral fee on that listing commission. I can now be in positive control of the entire buying process because I know the timelines, I know when they get an offer, I know I can feed them a drip campaign until they get their first offer, and then I know that I can jump on them like a Siamese twin and attach to their hip because I know they just got a contract on their house, and I know that I'll sell them their house in the next weekend or two if I just put in the time. So I believe it's about positive control to have the listing relationship before they put it on the market. So to me, a home run is when I get to go out and meet them at the house. The question we want to pose for you as a residential real estate agent in 2014 is maybe you're aiming for the wrong target. Just maybe, just maybe, especially if you're someone who's had a hard time breaking through 60 or 100 grand in income, you might be looking at the wrong target. You might be a great salesperson, but you might be shooting for the wrong bullseye. See, we believe, and we want you to know, that it's not a good goal to take buyers out and show them property. In fact, we believe it's the number one rookie mistake. We believe it's the number one rookie mistake in the residential real estate business that your goal is to take people out and show them houses. I see it all the time. It's our contention, and hopefully it's your contention, that it's not useful. It's just not useful to invest time and energy showing property to people who don't want to buy houses from you. So we've created yes, there will be a recording on the on-demand section, Patricia. Thanks for asking. So we have a system to convert these leads that is, I'm outside of the wheel of that conversation. I don't know why, because, question mark, but maybe you can post another question so I can get caught up. But the means to the end, the way to transition your role in their lives from a gopher or a chauffeur to a professional consultant and advisor is to constantly be approaching the relationship to them from the values that they value most. So when you see number 4 and you say expand their options monumentally, you're bringing up different cities, different subdivisions, different housing configurations, new construction opportunities that they weren't aware of, CTP construction where you can build on your own lot, anything that they haven't already thought of that's valuable to their total relationship to you. I think always being free with information. The reason I stay on B for a minute is because when I was a young agent, I was taught to hold back information, to be hold my information hostage to get them to come. I don't do that anymore. I really am very, very forthcoming with information. Creating financing options through your own experience or your own rules of thumb and explaining to them that there's buyer side grants, that there's down payment assistance, that you can get sellers to help with closing costs, that you have a team member on your team that is a financing expert at your lending partner. And then also using unique selling propositions. Setting a hook with something like Hero Home Source is very, very valuable. You can create an intensive amount of loyalty. Setting a hook with a upgrade program. If I sell your home and then sell you your next, we can save you lots of money. The exit upgrade program or the empty nester program, any of those programs that we've talked about in unique selling propositions are all very, very valuable. And then last but not least, you can really devise a tremendous amount of value when you're on the phone with a buyer and you're able to create if I could, would you closing opportunities. It's a nice way to see if this is a live one or not. Well, let me ask you something, Mr. Hyatt. If I could find you the right for 3.5 with a pool, and it was 315 or lower, with our target being 300, maybe 289.9. If I found you the right one, would you be able to close by the end of May? Those are great thought-leading questions. When you phrase an if I could, would you properly, it really cuts to the quick of their entire motivation, right? You're going to hear the pauses and stammers when they don't know how to respond to that. And that's a great way for young realtors to find out the true meaning of their motivation. Exceptional value means getting more than what you paid for. In other words, if you're going to present exceptional value to a buyer, you've got to present housing and subdivision offers that they didn't already think of. Wow, here's a first clue. Something that surprised them. Presenting information to them that they didn't think of before. The resale values in these subdivisions are typically higher because these schools are this, so I'm going to recommend we look in these 3 subdivisions as well. Well, I didn't even think of those 3 subdivisions. Well, I want you to open up to the idea of these 3 subdivisions, because in this price range that you're calling on, it doesn't have to be one of your choices, but it tends to be the most popular choices for between 289.9 and 315. Subdivisions like Sharks Hollow, Green River, blah, blah, blah. As you're giving them that new and different information that they didn't bring into the equation themselves, you create value for yourself. And also presenting the financing options, or at least rules of thumb. These are the bullseyes. These aha moments, these peculiar conversations that grow out of your own professionalism, your own willingness to help. I think if I'm going to pick up the phone to contact a buyer, or a buyer's picking up the phone to contact me, the most important thing that I can do is know the subject. In the initial conversation, I have to have had some forethought into what they were calling on, or what they were searching for online, so that subject becomes my greatest resource, the subject property. Now that's enough to invite me to say, I don't have that right in front of me. Can I call you back in about 10 minutes? One of the best things you can do to a buyer. Guess what? If the buyer doesn't want to give you the phone number, if the buyer doesn't want you to call him back in 10 minutes, he's never going to be in love with you anyway. So you need to be comfortable letting buyers walk away. And that means, Mr. Hyatt, I'm sorry, I just finished up another call. I know the subject property well, but I need to call you back in 10 minutes so that I can have all the information right in front of me. Is it okay that I call you back in 10 minutes? Because your job as the real estate professional is to know the subject and to know the rules of thumb, and to be able to say to somebody with an educated rules of thumb. Now, you're not a finance person. Your loan officer is your finance person, but you're allowed to generally explain things to them on the phone. In other words, if you were to buy this house FHA, it looks like your payment would be about $1,400 a month with taxes and insurance and everything in. Does that sound like something that's reasonable to you? If you put 20% down on this house, your payment would be down a little bit lower, down around just under $1,000 a month. Then you have to add your taxes and your insurance. Is that in your range? Knowing these rules of thumbs, especially in the finance world, is important. Now, I think it goes without saying that the more professional you are on the phone, the better your closing ratio is going to be. But I don't think everybody weighs their own enthusiasm. I don't think everybody judges their own level of proactivity. If you're offering easy and helpful ways to give them more information, you're going to differentiate yourself, because most realtors, let's face it, most licensed realtors in the United States are not doing a fantastic job. So if you do a fantastic job, you cut through the butter like a hot knife. If you're constantly surprising the consumer with your honesty and your helpfulness and your overwhelming generosity with information, you're going to be well received. So we're into the second step now after preparation, and now that you know the subject property that you're calling the buyer back on, what I'd like to see you do is go down a one-way street towards that subject property. What that means is, I don't want to use my bump to properties. I don't want to use anything other than my subject property for the first couple minutes that I'm on the phone with him. So Mr. Hyatt, I'm really glad that you called on this home in Savannah Square, and I know you're familiar with Savannah Square. This one is a pretty special house. It has a beautiful bay window. It's one of the few models in there that have 3 full bathrooms. So you're getting 4 bedrooms, but you're getting 3 full bathrooms. And each of the 4 has a closet. So you're not talking about a den or some kind of like a usable space. These are 4 true bedrooms with 3 bathrooms. And there's also a full 2-car garage. It's a very beautiful home. It's in Savannah Square, so it's going to go pretty quick. Does this house sound like something that you'd be interested in? See, number 8 just got highlighted, and basically there's 5 potential closing conversations right now on the subject property that you should insert. How does that compare to what you're looking for, Mr. Hyatt? Have you actually been in any of the similar homes to this one yet? Have you been inside or looked at any homes that are similar to this yet? I could probably get us an appointment for today or tomorrow. Would you like to see it? So I'm still using old school closing techniques on the phone, which hover in the number 8A through E sector at the beginning of my conversation, because this is where I can really test the buyer's motivation. I want to see if he recoils now or if he moves forward. How does that compare to what you're looking for? Have you looked at anything similar to this yet? All those closing questions result in an answer. But here's an interesting thing. I don't care what the answer is. In fact, in the back of my head, I actually hope that he says, that's not something I want. If he says, yes, that's what I want, or he says, no, that's not what I want, I'm still going to use this next step no matter what. And of all the things that I would stand for in the residential real estate business, the bump to process is one of the most important pieces during lead conversion. And I want you to listen carefully to why it's so important. Because if they said to you, yes, I love that house, I want to see that house in Savannah Square, most agents will just run out and show them that house. Bad choice. Very, very bad choice. A better choice is to entice them to want to do business only with you. So I say, great, well, I would love to show you the house in Savannah Square. While I have you on the phone, there is another property that you may find interesting. Have you ever looked in Glenwood? No, I haven't. Would you be interested in a vacant house in Glenwood that you might be able to steal for like $289,900? I'm sorry, he was a $249 buyer in my head, so let's go $189,900. Now I'm saying to him, I have another opportunity that just came up in the same subdivision, Shadowwood Square. It's a 4.2.5, not a 4.3, but it's a little less expensive. I have a 5-bedroom in Savannah Square that has a 3-car garage. Would that be of something that's interesting to you? Because if all I do is hone in on that subject property, then I'm not valuable as the conduit to the information. So regardless, I've got to ask him these bump to process questions. I got a couple of houses that I showed to some other folks this weekend that fall in this same product line. Would you like me to make those houses a priority for us too? Let me see if that one is still available that was on 5th Avenue and call you back, because I want to see if we can knock out a couple birds with the same stone. If their interest gets piqued on your subject properties, you've got an awesome opportunity now to set the hook. The key here is on the bottom. It says they must link you personally to the value that you're tossing across them. If all they think you are is a conduit to the MLS, then you're kind of dead in the water. I think that's a rookie mistake. They kind of have to see you personally, and your insight as the valuable commodity here, not a computer database. So I think the top agents use a system that looks like this. This is going to be a quick poke, just kind of a summary. Subject with enthusiasm and knowledge. This is the house that they called on. This big, hey, while I have you on the phone, there's a couple other houses that I have in mind that I'd like to talk to you about just to see if there's any interest. There's a bank foreclosure that's coming on the market tomorrow. I know the listing agent, and he's already told me it's going to come on. It's 242.9, so it represents a pretty good value. It's right around the corner from this house. I also know of a property that just fell through. The buyer failed to qualify. It's already approved for short sale. It's vacant. It's ready to go, and it's asking 239.9. And last but not least, I know this is kind of crazy. It's almost 2 miles away from the house you called on. And I don't know if you can afford this, but if I could buy any house under 300,000, this would be the one I would buy. I showed this one to my sister a couple days ago, and she still has a house to sell, so she can't buy it before she puts in an offer. This is a really slick house. I've been inside of it myself. I think it's a great one. If you were interested, I would like to show you all 4 of those houses at one time. Is that something that you'd be interested in doing? I know I could go off on this tangent, but I have to say this. Some people are oversimplifying this right now, and they see it as all we're saying is that you should try to show multiple homes at one time. That's not it. The secret here is that they see you as the resource for insider market information. The greatest lead conversion skill that you have is to differentiate yourself as the resource for the information. If you can learn how to do that, even if you're pulling the information out of the MLS, it's to create a relationship where they see you as the conduit to the information. Now, because you're going to see why we can now set the hook. Now that the buyer said, yes, I'm interested. I like those 3 houses and I want to show them to you. This is where the whole world changes for top producers versus bottom producers. Producers that sell under 100,000 a year. They don't close for the appointment yet. Just because the buyer wants to see houses doesn't mean I want to show them houses yet. So I need to now measure their willingness to work with me. This is the very next step. It's not to close for appointment. It's to measure whether or not I want to work with this buyer. So now I can say something like, Mr. Hyatt, when are you hoping to make a move into your next home? And how long have you been shopping for a home? Based on what we talked about so far, would you be interested in going out and seeing these homes tonight or tomorrow or maybe on Saturday? Great. Where do you live now? I have a couple places you like. Do you want to get together for a few minutes to go over them at one time? And all these kinds of questions. Now, number 7 is kind of a spin, and I just want to go ahead and use it real quick because this is a great way to set a hook and to really build this differentiation that we're talking about. Listen, I've got about 20 houses that I think you'll be pretty surprised by. I run the probate cases in Broward County. I run all the foreclosure cases. I stay on top of all the corporate reloads, and I run the divorces as well. If you come by my office, I'll put together a comprehensive package of everything we're going to be looking at, and we'll see if this is something that you want to move forward with. The only thing I want to tell you, Bob, is the really good deals move fast. They move in 1 day or sometimes fewer than 2 days on the market. Is this something that if I found you the right house for $249,900, that you'd be really ready to move on it in under 24 hours notice? Because the good deals just don't wait around. Are you ready to make a purchase and close by, say, May 30th? I might say that the most assertive agents at this point in the conversation are the highest paid. I don't want to do you a disservice and tell you to be difficult with your buyers, but I think that a buyer has to jump through hoops. If the buyer's not willing to jump through hoop 1, then I'm starting to send off clues. This buyer doesn't even want to talk to me. If I ask a buyer about where he lives now or how soon he's thinking about making a move, and he's not forthcoming with information, then I'm getting signs that this is a kind of buyer that could waste my time, right? It's not always if they qualify for a mortgage. It's that they want to execute on that qualification of a mortgage. It's that they want to list their house and get it for sale. More words on this page than any other page. I apologize for you. but you need to discover whether this buyer is a keeper or not. This is the time when you're reeling them into the boat that you're going to learn if it's worth dealing with them. So even though you're going to say, this course is all text, I don't like this visual here. I get it. But we give you the workbook to support it for a reason. And I would say something right now to the buyer and say, listen, I'm looking forward to you coming in tomorrow at 2. I'm going to prepare for this at great length. I'm going to do quite a bit of research between now and the time you come in at 2. Do you have a minute that I can ask you a couple more questions so I can get clear about what it is we're going to try to accomplish tomorrow? And this is the time while I'm reeling them in with these questions, whether I know that it's a small fish that I need to throw back in the pond for a little while to get bigger, or if this is a big fish that I know is going to close in the next few minutes. So while I'm reeling them in, I've got A through Z example questions that I can be asking the buyer to determine whether or not I want to keep this buyer. These are the building blocks of the entire sales process for a top agent. Will your children be attending public schools in the new home, or do you think you're going to be sending them to private schools? What grades are your children in? Are there any other factors that you're going to be using in regard to the house that you're going to be buying as to location in proximity to your husband's work, your work, anything social, churches, recreation? And then that if I could, would you is a great time to put this in. So let me ask you this, Bob. If I found you a house for $249,900, $229,900, $219,900 that made sense for you, and it was, interest rates are at an all-time low, pretty darn low, right? Would you be interested in moving and making a closing in May or June? I love these are great times for a great salesperson to make a good business decision. So the next step is now to make a business decision. And in my humble opinion, at the risk of going long, agents that make less than $60,000 a year don't even see the business decision. They don't even see that there is a business decision to be made. The business decision is, do I want to invest 15 to 25 hours of my time with this human being? And if I do, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get a check out of it? It's not, am I liked? Am I capable? It's, do I have a big fish on the line, or do I have a little itsy bitsy fish on the line? Just because the buyer wants to see houses from you doesn't mean that you should be wanting to show them houses. Have to ask yourself, is this buyer being open and honest? Is he being forthcoming with information? Is he eager to buy? Is he respectful and interested in my knowledge? Does he have some interest in the ideas that I'm bringing to the table and open to my suggestions? And does he respect my time and energy? Is he willing to share his ideas about the whole process, or is he tight-lipped? And finally, what I find out in the conference room is he committed to working with only me to find a house? I want to spend a couple of minutes on drawing a line in the sand, because potentially this line in the sand could become the most valuable piece of your professional endeavor, so that you can land big fish that have lots of value rather than little fish that don't close. Each of us knows a realtor in our office. Maybe we are the realtor in our office that spends weeks and weeks and weeks with the same buyer. You know that there's realtors in your office that'll spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, even 2 months with the same buyer. When you look at their W-2 at the end of the year, it usually has a 1099 at the end of the year. It usually has a 2 or a 3 as the first number, and it's only 5 digits long. So it's 20, 30,000 gross in income. They waste a lot of their time. A lot of times they're the agent that's writing multiple offers on houses. Like, I wrote an offer on one, it didn't go through. I wrote an offer on another one. Every time my buyer writes an offer, they write a lowball offer. I'm always showing property to buyers, but I'm not making very much money. In the business, we call these people chauffeurs and gophers, because they're on the opposite side of the line in the sand. They reside on the wrong side of the line. And then you find these agents in every market, in Arizona, Nevada, California. You see them in Pennsylvania, you see them in New Jersey. They really only show property when it's serious showings. It seems like their customers are more loyal to them, and it's like 8 out of 10 times when their buyer writes an offer, they write full price or very, very close to full price. They're not getting these 10% off the asking price offers. Well, maybe open yourself up. If there's certain things that I need to know how to do that. How do I do more series showings? How do I have more loyal customers? How do I get more full priced or very, very close to full price offers? How do I induce a sense of urgency in the buyers that I'm working with? How do I only work with qualified buyers and keep my income at the highest level per hour so that I'm more efficient and that I'm a closer? So I'm working with buyers an average of weeks or days instead of weeks and months. We call these folks professional consultants and advisors. And the reason we call them that is because they reside on the right side of the line in the sand. So this has been my line in the sand for the better part of my career, especially teaching, training, coaching others. And that is, I'm not going to take someone out and show them the house unless they got a full pre-qualification with my lending partner. That's it. That's a foregone conclusion for me. I'm not going to show out property if I can help it unless I have both decision makers together. And I have made money doing that, but it's a hit or miss game. And then I want to have a meeting in the conference room. That's my goal. And then finally, I want them to sit through 10 or 15 minutes of a buyer side presentation. And if not a written agreement, I at least want to have a voice-to-voice emotional connection with the buyer that they are interested in working with me and only me. Now, I say that because every state's different as far as laws. A lot of real estate agents choose buyer representation agreements as their line in the sand. I don't know if that's proper for you, but at the very, very least, I think they need to be pre-qual with your lender. I think they need to be committed to coming into the conference room and sitting down. I think that they should sit down with you and go through a presentation about yourself, your company, the searching process, what you're looking to do with them, and reach an agreement that if we find a house, you've got to have your checkbook handy. You know, this isn't going to be a situation where I'm going to show you a house on Wednesday and then you're going to think about it till Sunday and then you're going to put an offer on Monday. That just doesn't work in 2014. The inventory of move-in ready homes is at an all-time low. And the reality is if I'm going to take you out and show you houses, we're going to build a relationship that says, okay, we found one, let's write an offer because we need to move relatively quickly if we're going to be able to capitalize on any good deals that we find. How does that feel to you? Are you just browsing? Because that's fine. If we want to just look at some good stuff and then get back together in a couple months and buy a house, that's fine. But I just need to know that. Because if we find a hot deal in 2014, it's going to be hours, not days, that house will stay on the market if it represents a good one. Is that a fair thing to say? So we're almost done, guys. I know I always go a little long on this particular class because I know there's differing levels of skill sets on this particular subject, and not everybody agrees with our philosophy or on the line in the sand. But if you're going to bend your line in the sand closer to the buyer and take more risk with buyers, that's fine, but realize that that's quite the reason that you're spending time with buyers that aren't buying houses sometimes, right? So we're going to go to a single transaction buyer as we start to wrap up this conference and go look forward towards Wednesday. On a single transaction buyer, it means they just want to buy a house. They've already sold their house or they're renting currently or they don't own a house. My goal is to get them in the conference room. If I can't get them in the conference room, I at least want to get them on the phone with my loan officer. So I have a 1-2 punch. I'm going for a conference room, but if I can't get them in the conference room, I'm going to close them for a pre-qual on the phone. I believe that most realtors that make under $100,000 a year don't utilize their lending partner in the proper way. I use my lending partner as a sales partner. I allow my lending partner to work shoulder to shoulder with me to help the buyer move along in the transaction process. And my loan officer, my partner, is actually going to help build my credibility with the buyer and endorse my expertise to the buyer to help them even become more loyal to me. And then my loan officer partner is going to report back to me things that happen in conversations, not breaking the confidences of credit act or anything like that, but just letting me know what their mindset is, if they're thinking about moving forward very, very soon, or if this might take a little longer. In your workbook, there's a great list, 1 through 11, of everything that I'd want to bring into a perfect conference room conversation with a first-time home buyer or a single property purchaser. Maybe they've already sold their house, maybe they're renting right now, but I want to have PITI, I want to have down payment, I want to have a set appointment for my loan officer to be in the room with me, and I want to have all the school's information. I want to make sure that they know that there's an in-house attorney that's available to them and some inspector brochures. If it's a multi-transaction buyer, then I want to treat it differently. I don't want them to come to the conference room because they have another house to sell. If this is a person who has a house to sell, I would forego the conference room appointment and I would go straight to their house. And I would bring everything that I brought into the conference room appointment, but I would also bring seller's estimated net proceeds. I'd bring a listing presentation. I'd want to inform them of any unique selling propositions that I have, like upgrade programs or empty nester programs. And of course, I'd want to do a BPO on their house because this is a listing appointment, baby. This is not a standard run-of-the-mill buyer inquiry anymore. This is someone that represents the most valuable prospect in the industry, somebody that I can go out, list their home, and then work with them in positive control of the buyer's timeline and the buyer's sequence, and to have insider information about the timing of everything and how the offers are proceeding. This is the most valuable consumer that I can find in the residential real estate business. And the surprising thing is that some buyers actually disregard, some buyer's agents actually disregard buyers who call on their properties and they say, oh, we still have a house to list. And then they think, oh, I can't sell them a house. Well, that's the opposite way that a top realtor should be thinking. Just a couple tips on showing property. Before I go out and show property, I've got to make that all important business decision. I've been in a conference room with someone, listened to everything they had to say, discussed all the options, went through my buyer's presentation, and realized during that presentation that these people are not willing, they're not ready, they're not able. Even if they're able to buy, they're not ready or willing. They're not forthcoming, they're not in a hurry, they have no sense of urgency. And what am I going to do with them? I'm going to say, all right, sit tight here, and I'm going to introduce you to Judy, because Judy's going to be working with you from this point forward. And I'll stay in relationship to Judy, because Judy's going to be the one showing you houses. And I'm going to TO them to Judy, because believe me, Judy wants to take out buyers for a living. That's what she does for a living. That's called a buyer's agent. If I've sat with these people and I don't think that they have a sense of urgency, if I don't think that they're moving along for my pace, then I'm not going to take them out and show them houses. I'm going to refer them to a buyer's agent. And I'll only work with a buyer if they're ready, willing, and able, not just able. It's not good enough just to be able to buy a house. You have to be ready and willing to buy a house. Once I have established that I want to show them houses, I'm going to be fastidious in my searching. I'm going to search over and over and over and search different ways to find more houses to show them. And very much like a Siamese twin, I'm going to attach myself to their hip, because now I've committed. I know this person's ready, willing, and able to buy a house. This is a pretty common thing. Realtors eliminate houses too fast. The buyer said 4-2 with a pool, so they just pull up 4-2s with a pool. What about a 3 with a den that has a pool? What about a 4 with a 3 that's more square footage that has room for a pool? What about a house that's a 5-bedroom, 4.5 bath with no pool? Why did you eliminate just because they said 4-2 with a pool? Why not you expanding their opportunities rather than limiting their opportunities? Too often, realtors will show property for 2 weeks and then go find the buyer bought a house that was completely different than the one they told them they wanted. Well, that's because you're operating as a chauffeur and a gopher, going out and bringing them the properties that they said they wanted, rather than acting as a professional consultant and advisor, telling them what they should be looking at. Couple last things. We're jumping off the horn right now. For sale by owners. Don't let the buyer bring for sale by owners to you. You need to go out and approach all the for sale by owners in that price range and bring them to the buyer with a signed piece of paper that says you're getting paid a commission if that seller sells it to them. Your buyer does not have to be involved in that process. You can go hit the buy owners before the buyer brings them to you. Eliminate properties reluctantly. That goes back to what we were just talking about. Don't whittle away their subdivision options. Don't whittle away their bedroom options, their pool options, just because of what they said. You want to continue to test their convictions and revisit old conversations during the process. It's hard to transfer 28 years of residential real estate experience in less than an hour, but ultimately, always be revisiting houses that you saw last week, last month, because situations change. And remember, I don't have a preference on which one you buy. I only have a preference that you buy it through me. Yeah? See, I like to say that to my buyers. I like them to know that I don't have a preference. So we always end this first session on tricks of the trade, and we're going to give you a few of the tricks of the trade. Hopefully they'll be useful for you. And then we're going to wrap up and call it a day. Meet back on Wednesday if you want to come back. While I'm with a buyer in the car, I like to have conversations about the pace of the market. I'm not going to say right to their face that they need to hurry up, but I'm going to infer things about the pace of the market that make it feel like things are moving a little quicker. I'm going to casually mention homes that have sold fast. I'm going to casually mention houses that have sold for full price. I'm going to have light, oh, by the way, conversations about a house that we just drove by that we looked at on a Wednesday. It was sold by Friday, and we missed out on it. See, the truth is, number 4, houses that are in this market are really priced really to sell. They're averaging 97 and 99% of asking price. Very few houses are selling at less than 97, 98% of asking price in 2014. The reason for that is you as a buyer and they as a seller are privy to the same computer database. You could see the sales information. There's very little trickery going on. There's very little room for lowball offers or for overpriced listings. The technology is too great now. You can tell a house won't appraise if it's overpriced, and you can tell if you're trying to steal a house by lowballing it. We're going to get aggressive with offers when we see the right house needs a little bit of work, but I'm just going to tell you, a lot of houses are going to go for 97, 99, even 100% of asking price. In fact, this year I've already sold 5 houses that we sold for 102 to 106% of asking price because we knew it was a good deal, so we went ahead and wrote over market value. That sometimes the buyer's going to have to make a decision to write 102% of asking price to ensure they get the house. Don't worry, because we can write special clauses in to protect you against a house that doesn't appraise or anything that pops up on an appraisal or an inspection. These are all things that you should be setting a precedence or a tone with the buyer going in. A couple more tricks of the trade and then we're going to wrap up. I like to tell the buyer during the process, you know, roof leaks and cracks in the tile and things like that are important, but the truth is we should find a house that you make an emotional connection with and then know that we can have a full inspection immediately following. You know, we're going to write in a 3 to 5 day, a 10-day inspection period, and that's going to give you an opportunity to have a professional come out and look at these things. I mean, let's not get all caught up in, you know, a hairline crack in the patio, which is a settlement crack. Let's instead, rather than guess that it's a sinkhole, let's say, okay, it's a settlement crack. We have to have that inspected. And 8 and 9 are very similar rules of thumb. Just don't typically agree to take a buyer out alone, you know, husband or wife by themselves. It's not a good use of your time. You can bend once in a while, but be very, very cautious of buyers who suggest that I'll make the decision, my husband doesn't care, and things like that. Number 9 applies the same with in-laws or rich uncles that are helping with the buying process. If rich uncle's given 30 grand to buy a house, then rich uncle should come along for the ride and look at the houses. Or if grandma's helping finance it, then let's get grandma involved in the process so she knows that you're making a good decision with the right house to buy. And then probably the one that I've said most often during this session is make sound business decisions with your time. Do not be afraid to fire a buyer or refer a buyer to another agent in the office if they're reluctant to make a move. I've ended this session the same way for the last 7 or 8 years now. I spent $15 on a car detailer before I ever picked up a buyer. Every time I wanted my car to look clean. I always brought PS3 or Nintendo DSs for any kids. If the kids were under the age of 6, we always brought coloring books for the kids that were with us, because the buyer process can be long and hot and tedious. And if you're a kid and you're going from house to house to house, it's exciting. But then when the conversations are taking place, when the offers are being written, when conversations are in, that kid's so bored, a lot of times that kid can become the reason that they need to leave the office earlier. So protecting yourself with coloring books and Sony PlayStations and Nintendos and things like that is a good idea. Another trick of the trade is to give every single person that comes along the ride the respect of a clipboard with all the houses on it and a pen. Imagine if you're 14 and your mom and dad are looking at a house with you and you're given a clipboard with all the houses on it to write down your pros and cons or comments on the clipboard as well, just like mom and dad. Or imagine if you're an in-law and you're helping out with down payments and you're coming along. You're not bringing one clipboard for the wife. You're bringing one for the wife, the husband, the kids, and the grandma. And you're going to include all the properties that you're going to see. It makes everybody in the car feel popular, appreciated, important to the process, and it really does help to create an environment that's conducive to open dialogue, because after you're done, you can say, what did you think of it? What did you think of it? What did you think of it? And I'm in Florida. If you're in Arizona, Nevada, if you're getting closer to the spring and summer months, want to keep a cooler in the back of your car with some bottled water in it. It makes everybody feel warm and fuzzy when you've been showing houses for half a day and you pull out bottles of water or little snacks for the kids and stuff like that. On Wednesday this week, we're going to be doing a session that focuses squarely on the buyer side presentation. That buyer side presentation is going to be taught on Wednesday at noon. And for now, I'm going to say thank you very much for your time and attention. I think this particular course is the most text-driven that we do. So hopefully you had your workbook to follow along, and maybe you grabbed a jewel or two out of this conversation. Maybe you've discovered a whole new protocol for how to approach buyers differently. And most importantly, what I hope you got out of this is the responsibility to make a good business decision with your time before you move on with any step of the buyer lead conversion process. Thanks again for being on, and please say thank you to your loan officers directly, especially in the context of this class. Say, hey, I took that buyer ad sign and internet class, and I want to start working with you more closely on converting buyer side leads. Thanks again.